There was a time when football believed it had already seen the future. And that future smiled. It danced through defenders, embarrassed entire teams for fun, played football like rules didn't exist. That future was Neymar. Before Mbappe, before Haaland, before the new generation of superstars, there was one player the football world believed would inherit everything. The crowns, the Ballon d'Ors, the World Cups, the throne after Messi and Ronaldo, not because the media forced the narrative. Because football itself felt different when Neymar touched the ball. Every touch felt dangerous. Every dribble felt impossible. Every match felt like a performance. And maybe that's what made Neymar special. He didn't just play football, he made football feel alive. Like the streets of Brazil somehow escaped into the biggest stadiums on earth. And honestly, for a while, it felt inevitable, like football had already chosen its next king. But somewhere along the way, the story changed. The smiles slowly faded, the injuries became endless, the pressure became unbearable, and the player who once looked destined to rule football slowly became football's greatest unfinished dream. Not a failure, not a flop, something sadder, a possibility. Because when people talk about Neymar, they still don't talk about what he became. They talk about what he could have been. And maybe that's why his story hurts so much, because deep down, football never stopped believing in him. This is the rise and fall of Neymar. Before the money, before Paris, before the criticism, before the memes, before the injuries, there was just a skinny kid in Brazil playing football with joy most players lose by adulthood. Neymar didn't move like normal footballers. Even as a teenager, he played with chaos, street football, futsal instincts, pure imagination. Everything about him felt Brazilian. The confidence, the swagger, the creativity, the disrespect toward defenders. Football didn't look stressful around Neymar. It looked fun. And Brazil fell in love with that immediately. Because Brazil wasn't searching for another superstar. Brazil was searching for magic, someone who could make football feel beautiful again, someone who could make the world fear Brazilian football again. And suddenly, that responsibility landed on Neymar before he was even old enough to understand it. But somehow, he still smiled through everything. That was the terrifying part. The pressure never seemed to touch him. At least not yet, because during those Santos years, football still looked light around Neymar. Like a game, like happiness. And the more the world watched him, the bigger the hype became. This wasn't normal football hype anymore. This was future Ballon d'Or hype, future king hype, future face of football hype. People weren't asking if Neymar would become the best player in the world. They were asking when. And honestly, it made sense. Because there were moments where Neymar genuinely looked supernatural. Not just skilled. Different. Like he understood football in ways other players didn't. And eventually, Europe came calling. The biggest clubs in the world wanted him. But one destination always felt inevitable. Barcelona. The perfect stage for football's next prince. And when Neymar finally arrived, it felt like football history was beginning. Neymar at Barcelona didn't feel real, because somehow football placed the most entertaining young player in the world beside the greatest player in the world, Lionel Messi, and then added Luis Suarez beside them. MSN. 3 letters that terrified football for years. But what made MSN special wasn't only goals. It was joy, chemistry, freedom, the feeling that football had become art again. Messi controlled football. Suarez destroyed football. But Neymar entertained football. He brought chaos. Every touch felt dangerous. Every dribble felt disrespectful. Every match felt unforgettable. And slowly, football started whispering something dangerous again. What if Neymar becomes the next king after Messi and Ronaldo? Because during those Barcelona years, it honestly looked inevitable. Neymar wasn't simply improving. He was evolving. Big matches stopped scaring him. Pressure stopped affecting him. And maybe no moment captured this better than Barcelona versus PSG. 4 goals down. Humiliated, finished, The comeback looked impossible, and then football witnessed madness. 6 goals. Pure chaos. One of the greatest nights in Champions League history. But what many people forget is that Neymar became the soul of that comeback, not Messi. Neymar. The free kick, the penalty, the assist, the leadership. For one night, football truly looked at Neymar like the future king. And maybe that became the problem, because shortly after that night, Neymar made the biggest decision of his career, and football would never look at him the same way again. 222 million euros. A number so absurd it barely felt real. The most expensive transfer in football history. Neymar leaving Barcelona for PSG didn't just shock football, it changed football forever. And honestly, on paper, the move made sense. At Barcelona, Neymar would always exist beside Messi's shadow. At PSG, he could finally become the main character. The king, the Ballon d'Or winner, the face of football. This was supposed to be Neymar's empire, but instead it slowly became football's greatest tragedy. Because from the moment Neymar arrived in Paris, the feeling changed. The smiling prince suddenly became the villain. People called him selfish, overrated, a money chaser. And for the first time in his career, football's love for Neymar slowly turned into frustration. But maybe the saddest part of all is that Neymar was still magical. Even at PSG, people forget this constantly. Because the internet remembers the injuries, but forgets the football, and Neymar's football was still unbelievable. On his best nights, he still looked untouchable. The dribbling, the creativity, the confidence, he could still destroy entire teams alone. But football can be cruel to emotional players, and Neymar played with emotion constantly. Every tackle looked personal, every injury looked painful, every criticism followed him everywhere, and slowly his body started breaking down. Again and again and again, the injuries became endless. Ankles, feet, ligaments, every season something happened, and somehow the timing always felt cruel. Champions League knockouts, World Cups, international tournaments, the biggest moments. Like football itself, refused to let Neymar fully arrive. And then came the heaviest pressure of all, Brazil. Because no matter what Neymar achieved in Europe, his legacy would always be judged through one thing, the World Cup. That is the curse of Brazilian superstars. And in 2014, football saw the beginning of Neymar's pain. Brazil hosted the World Cup. The entire country believed. Neymar wasn't just a footballer anymore. He became hope itself. And then the injury happened, and suddenly Brazil collapsed emotionally. 7-1, Germany, one of the darkest nights in football history. And even though Neymar didn't play that match, the trauma followed him forever. Then came 2018. More pressure, more expectations, more criticism, and this time the internet became cruel. People mocked the diving, mocked the reactions, mocked the emotions. Neymar slowly became a meme instead of a footballer, and maybe that's when football truly stopped understanding him, because Neymar was never emotionless. He felt everything, the pressure, the hate, the injuries, the expectations. And maybe that emotional intensity is exactly what made him magical in the first place, but football rarely protects emotional players. It consumes them. And by 2022, the feeling around Neymar had changed completely. No longer football's future king. Now, he felt like football's greatest unfinished story. And somehow that feels even sadder, because despite everything, Neymar still produced moments of magic. Moments where the old Neymar returned briefly. A dribble, a goal, a smile, a reminder of what football once believed he would become. And maybe that's why Neymar remains so loved. Because fans didn't simply watch Neymar play football. They imagined possibilities through him. What if he stayed at Barcelona? What if injuries never happened? What if Brazil won the World Cup? What if pressure never consumed him? Football fans will debate Neymar forever. Was he wasted potential? Was he unlucky? Did he ruin his own legacy? Maybe. Maybe not. But one thing is undeniable. For a moment, Neymar genuinely looked destined to rule football. And honestly, maybe that's enough to make him unforgettable. Because football isn't only about statistics. It's about feeling, emotion, memories, and few players made football feel like Neymar did. That's why his story hurts. Not because Neymar failed, but because football saw how beautiful the story could have been. And maybe, somewhere deep down, fans are still waiting for one last magical Neymar moment. One final reminder of the prince football thought would become king. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. Because even now, when people talk about Neymar, they still talk about possibility, not ending. Possibility. Like football itself never fully let go of the dream. And maybe it never will. Because players come and go, legends rise and fall. But some football stories stay emotional forever, and Neymar's story will always feel unfinished. And here at Cold Kick, those are the football stories we remember most.